Okay, we're resuming after our tea break on the Dublin Urban Rivers Live Conference. Our next speaker is Brina Shields, an environmental scientist, and the GIS and technical support, and a few other things besides for the Dublin Urban Rivers Live project. So I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about decision support tools and GIS.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So as Richard said, I hope you're still with me because I'm going to take you through in this workshop the misconnection decision support tool that was developed throughout the course of this project. So I'm going to cover what the decision support tool is, what it's trying to achieve. I'm going to walk you through the platform. I'll give you some background information that will help us go through a worked example using the steps that are on the decision support tool. And finally, I'll end by showing you some dashboards that are possible from a reporting perspective. So what is the decision support tool? The decision support tool is an online interactive platform, and this encompasses a decision tree that will help you decide whether you can replicate the Durl's approach to addressing domestic misconnections and the door-to-door aspects of the Durl project. It also contains all the guidance documents and learnings from the Durl project in one place, and it also covers the integrated constructed wetlands, the documentation, and cost estimates. And Jer's going to cover that in his workshop after this. So now I'm going to take you to what the decision support tool platform looks like. So this is the homepage for the decision support tool. And again, this was developed throughout the course of the project to help other local authorities and organizations if they want to try and replicate the Durl's approach to domestic misconnections. So I'm just going to cover the door-to-door aspects. So first we go to the decision tool, and this is a decision tree that asks a series of questions that will help you decide whether you can replicate the door-to-door work. So it's a decision tree, the first question being, do you have a polluted outfall on a stormwater line? So this is asking from the results of your water quality monitoring, do you have pollution in your outfall? And the outfall is the drain or outlet to the river. And the answer to that is yes, we do have pollution in our outfalls. Oh. Oh. Oh, that's on the other screen. Is that wrong? Yeah.
Hi, sorry, we've just stopped the presentation for a moment just while we rectify the presentation in the theatre. It just wasn't displaying for us. I believe it was displaying online. So we're just going through that little technical thing.
So when you come back into the PowerPoint, just go full screen again, okay?
Great, I think we're back on track.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. So that was the first question I covered that online you couldn't see. So it's, do you have a polluted outfall? Okay, now. So the first question, do you have a polluted outfall? So we answered yes to that. The second question then pops up, do you have domestic misconnection pollution sources? So again, from the results of your water quality monitoring and the knowledge of your area, do you have domestic misconnection? Next question, in order to set up our solution, you need to have the following Esri products. So we use ArcGIS Pro Online, Survey 123, and Field Maps. And in order to replicate this, you need at least an advanced license for ArcGIS Pro and at least one creator and one mobile worker user roles for the ArcGIS Online part of the workflow. So I'll answer yes to this, as we have this in place. The next is to start gathering the data sets. So do we have our geodirectory and high quality aerial photography? And when I take you through the worked example, I'll go into this in more detail. We have that in place. Then it asks us about the resources that were needed. Do we have the staffing that was talked about earlier today? Do we have the financial IT equipment like our tablets and laptops? Do we have the tools needed to carry out the door-to-door work, vehicles, PPE, etc.? And again, we have all that in place. Then it brings us to the community engagement aspect. Do we have supportive councillors and public on board with the project from the outset? And again, we have that in place. Last question now is, do you have access to manholes on the stormwater drainage line? So as was mentioned earlier today, an important part of the process is the screening of manholes. So you need to have access to the manholes in order to screen them. So again, I'll answer yes to that. And this decision tree will then give us a pass-fail result. So because we've answered yes to all of the preceding questions, we meet all the requirements to undertake this type of work and follow the Durl's approach. And the next step now is to go to the GIS solution. So this is a 10-step process that will help you to replicate this in your own area. It's a 10-step process, but the majority of these 10 steps are reusable, and the only thing that changes each time is the data that you're gathering and you're feeding into this process. So I'm going to take you through the 10 steps now, and then we'll go through a worked example. So step 1 is around sourcing your data. So get the locations of your houses in your area, get the information about your stormwater drainage and your aerial photography that will help us identify those high-risk houses, those with extensions or outbuildings. The next step in the process is to actually draw the boundaries, so that's tracing from your outfall back up the stormwater line to all the houses draining to that outfall, and this boundary forms the basis of our work and helps to manage and move between different areas. Step number 3 is then to start your manhole screening, so this involves creating a manhole screening app, and the Decision Support Tool platform contains the detailed how-to documents about how to go through this. So when this is shared with you, you can read this in your own time. Step number 4 is then identifying what manholes you're going to screen and then screening those manholes. And again, we have the detailed documents about how to use those apps that you can share with your field crew. Step number 5 is then to process the results of your manhole screening and create a link between your manholes that you screened and the houses that are draining to those manholes. Step number 6 is the most crucial part of the entire process. This is where you add your actual survey questions onto your data set. So the Durl project has developed a template of about 30 plus survey questions, and we're providing the template for that on the Decision Support Tool platform. And this uses Survey123 to connect, and it feeds this template into that and controls the behavior of the form that the stormwater assessors use every day. If you were to try and replicate this part of the project yourself, this is the part that would take months and months of work and development to figure out your schema and to figure out the behavior of your questions, and we're providing that on the platform. Step number 7 then is around allocating the houses, and we have an app for that. This is used by the project team to assign work to the field crew, the stormwater assessors. Step number 8 is then to actually start creating the app that the stormwater assessors use every day. So this involves making a web map on ArcGIS Online and then feeding that web map into the actual door-to-door app. So everything up to this point has led to this door-to-door app, and this is what the stormwater assessors use every day to capture the results of the door-to-door process. And finally, step number 10 on the Decision Support Tool goes into all the letter templates and standard operating procedures. So you'll see here we have links to all of the templates that were discussed earlier today, your card drops, enforcement notices, misconnection notices, and a flowchart of the overall process, which Lauren went into earlier today. Now I'm going to go back to the presentation, and we're going to go through a worked example of how you can follow these 10 steps if you were starting out in your own area. So just a minute. Okay. So before I take you through the worked example, I'm just going to take a step back to show you the scale of what we're dealing with and why we needed to develop a GIS solution for this project. So Lorraine mentioned this in her presentation already today, but we were working in 2 catchments, the Graphene catchment, which has over 10,000 properties, and the Carrick Mine stream in Dunleary Rathdown area, and again has over 10,000 properties. So we're dealing with a huge volume of information, and we needed a process that was scalable and would provide an end-to-end solution for the project. So this is how we came up with this GIS solution. Now let's take an example area and go through the 10 steps. So as I mentioned, step 1 is sourcing your data. So first thing to source is your aerial photography. So for this specific subcatchment that we're looking at, we've sourced the aerial photography. For South Dublin County Council, we already had existing high-resolution recent aerial photography, so this came at no extra cost to the project. The second piece is to get your geodirectory. So geodirectory is a joint data set between An Post and Tailteann Éireann, and it contains the location and address of all properties. This is released every quarter, and it's up-to-date data set. And again, this came at no extra cost to the project. It was a data set that South Dublin County Council already has access to. For the purposes of the Durl project, we were only looking at domestic misconnections, so the geodirectory comes with all residential commercial properties. So we've removed all under construction and commercial properties, as we're not interested in bringing these forward into the door-to-door assessment process. So once you've sourced all your data, now you can start layering up your information and looking at your storm water drainage. So what you want to do is work from your outfall back. So you can see here in the first image, we have the outfall marked in the red point. We use what's a utility network tracing tool, and what this tool does is you select your pipe or manhole, and it traces all of the upstream manholes and pipes from that point. So this now tells us all of the pipes that are draining to this outfall. Then we can layer in our geodirectory, so the location of all of our houses, and our base maps, and we can digitize the boundary that contains all of those houses and all of that storm network draining to that specific outfall. When we do this for this specific example, we end up with 2,700 houses are draining to this outfall. So how can we then start to further refine this number of houses down before we bring them forward to the door-to-door assessment process? This is where our manhole screening comes in. So we gather our storm manhole data set, and that's indicated in the green dots. Now that we have a boundary to work with, we can easily identify what manholes are draining to that outfall. Before we bring this forward to the manhole screening, we want to add certain fields that will help in the field data collection. And the decision support tool breaks down exactly what these fields are. The most important ones are the fields to track the result of the screening. And this field is called clean, and it's a domain of yes, no, or inconclusive. Another field that the Durl project has created is a unique identifier that's called a mini sub ID. All you need to know about this is that it's going to be used to create a link between our manholes and the houses that drain to that manhole. The second part of this key manhole screening process is to create a boundary. And again, this boundary is going to be used to create a link between our manholes and our houses in later steps. So now we've gathered our boundary, we've gathered our storm manhole data set. We're ready now to take this information onto ArcGIS Online and start to develop the manhole screening app that's going to be used by the project team. So this uses the web map viewer, and this is on ArcGIS Online. You basically use what are called smart forms. These are arcade scripts that automate certain calculations. And the thing to take away from this is that these will help speed up the editing process and lead to less validation later down the line and less human error. And the decision support tool explains exactly how to create these. Now that we have our map, we can then create the app, and this is using the instant app template on ArcGIS Online. And this process takes about 10 clicks to create an app that looks something like this. So this app then is used by the project team to identify what manholes are going to be brought forward for screening. So you can see here in blue, I've highlighted this manhole that I want to take forward for screening. And the Durl strategy for choosing what manholes was to focus on manholes that were at junctions with more than one pipe, so you could get multiple information from different lines at once, and also to focus on manholes that are located on the pavement versus manholes that are on roads. And as Paul talked about earlier, we also carried out analysis that looked at the distance from manholes and houses, and from that we're recommending that you're never more than 100 metres away from the manhole, as you have run the chance of missing any misconnections the further away you get. So I've chosen this manhole to bring forward for screening. I name it, I give it a unique identifier, and then I hit create, and you can see in the second tab, this manhole is now instantly visible. So this is visible to the office team and visible to the stormwater assessors on the ground. There's no delay between the identification of this on the office and them seeing it in the field. The second part of the identifying is to draw that boundary that I mentioned, and again, the boundary is going to be used to link our manholes and houses together in a later step. So you create that boundary in the office, like so. Once you do that, you've created all your manholes that you're going to bring forward for screening. So we've brought down the number of manholes that we started out with. Now we're down to 68 manholes that we're going to screen in this specific area. And again, multiple people can be working on this app at once. So multiple people in the office can be adding manholes for screening, and multiple people can be working in the field lifting these manholes. And this is a completely live process. As soon as it's added in the office, it's visible in the field. And the important thing as well about the manhole screening is that it's weather dependent. So this app allows for a quick turnaround time. Now that we've identified the manholes, we can bring them forward for screening. So this is the app that the stormwater assessors use, and this uses field maps. And again, this is an Esri product that comes at no extra cost as part of the Esri suite. So you can see here, this is the manhole I created in the earlier step. I click on that manhole, it brings up the fields that we added. And again, the most important field being this field clean, which is a drop down of yes, no, or inconclusive. So I choose no, that this manhole is polluted, it's not clean. I click submit, and the map updates to show that now this point has a red icon indicating that it is polluted. Once you screen all of your manholes, you'll end up with something that looks like this. So we have a mixture of green and red points, green meaning they're clean and red meaning they're not clean. So now that we have all of our manholes screened, we need to process the results of our manhole screening and validate and QA our data. So this is step number 5 in the process. So we do that validation, we QA what's coming back into us, and now we need to create a link between the manhole screening results and our houses. So we can't rely on any kind of direct spatial relationship between the manholes and houses, as the closest manhole is not always the correct manhole. So this is where that boundary that I talked about comes in. So this boundary is creating a link between all of our 3 different data sets. So that process works like so. You first link your manhole that you screened to that boundary, and you pull that unique identifier across. Now that you have that unique identifier within your boundary, you can link it to your houses as you have a spatial relationship between these, and you can pull that unique identifier across into your houses. So now we have the unique identifier present in all of our data sets, so we can join our key manhole directly to our houses using that unique identifier and transfer the results of the screening across, so that being the clean field most importantly. So just again to recap those 5 steps before we move on to the door-to-door side of things. So this was sourcing the data, getting the geodirectory, your storm manholes, your aerial photography, getting your drainage boundaries, so finding your outfalls, tracing it back, drawing the boundary around the houses that are draining to it. Then starting to narrow down those houses even more by doing your manhole screening, so creating the application, identifying the fields or identifying what manholes you're going to screen using the app. Then the stormwater assessor is actually screening the manholes using field maps, and then that coming back into the office and the doing the processing of that, and that's using ArcGIS Pro. So now that we have the results of our manhole screening and we have all the locations of our houses and we've created a link between those, we can narrow down the houses that are on polluted lines. So we started out with 2,700 houses, and we've now brought that down to 1,700 houses or so. This is now where we start to look at the high probability or high risk, so those houses with extensions or large outbuildings. So using our example of the manhole we created in the previous step and this aerial photography that we sourced, I've highlighted these 3 houses. So we would bring these 3 houses forward for the door-to-door assessment process. So it's important that your aerial photography is a high enough resolution that you can pick out these extensions, and it needs to be recent, otherwise you run the chance of missing an extension that was built in the intervening years that might be causing the misconnection. So now, following that process, we've narrowed down that number of houses even further to 700 houses, and we can now start to develop our door-to-door assessment survey. So again, this is the part of the process where it would take you many months to replicate this yourself. And on the Decision Support Tool platform, we've included the template that you can use. So this uses Survey 123 Connect. It's another Esri product that comes at no extra cost to use. And this is where you're adding the survey questions to your house points. And there's about 30 plus specific questions that have been developed for the door-to-door assessment process. And the Survey 123 Connect also allows you to create the behavior of your form, so how the stormwater assessors are going to interact with it in the field. And yeah, the decision support tool breaks this down step by step in more detail. But once you've set that up, you then publish that to ArcGIS Online, and now we start allocating work to the field crew. So this is using an allocator app. Again, this is on ArcGIS Online, uses an online web app builder, and the detailed documents about how to set this up are on the platform. So we publish all of our house locations onto there, so we can see, for our example, there's all of our houses. Now we need to start assigning what work is going to be brought forward for the process. So this is where you select what houses are on polluted manholes and they have extensions, and we update the status of these houses. So the first point in the door-to-door process is the card drop process, as we talked about earlier today. So that's the status of these properties. So you can see those properties that were on polluted lines and have extensions are now flagged to begin the door-to-door process. We also want to identify the houses that we found on the clean lines. So we can do that easily now that we've linked our 2 data sets together. And the Durl project uses the assumed connected status for these. So because the manhole was clean, we're assuming that these houses have no misconnections. So the allocator app is also used by the office team to then assign it to a specific work crew. So I'm using this fictional address as an example. They would fill in what team they want it to go to, what appointment date and time, and the next contact, i.e. what is the purpose of the stormwater assessor's visit to the property. Once they click save, that's instantly visible to everybody. And we've allocated the work to the team. Now we need to actually develop the door-to-door app that's used by the stormwater assessors. So the first part of that process is to make the web map. And again, this is on ArcGIS Online. It's a simple web map that looks at the same data set we've been talking about, the house locations with the survey questions, but it's symbolized by the next contact field, as that is what the stormwater assessors need to see. It tells them the reason for their visit. Once we've created the app, or the map, we can now create the app. So everything has led us up to this point, and this is the backbone of the project. It's what the stormwater assessors use every day to see what work they have scheduled and also to capture the results of the door-to-door process. So it's a simple ArcGIS online dashboard. It has a list of addresses on the left-hand side that you can see here. It tells them the reason for their visit and the time of the visit. So they can choose an address from the left. It'll bring them to that location on the map. And it will also filter the survey on the right-hand side. So this is the survey that we created in step number 6. And it's just been embedded into this dashboard. So the stormwater assessors will fill in this survey on the right, and this is where they capture all of the important information, like the date of their assessment, the card drop process, what's misconnected, what appliances, where the misconnection was found, the cost of repairs. So this is what's capturing all of the data that's coming back in from the project. So now that we've created the door-to-door app, I just want to recap the 10 steps again. So again, you source your data, draw your drainage boundaries, create your manhole screening app, identify the manholes in the field, screen the manholes, process the results of your manholes. Oh, sorry, skip ahead. Create your door-to-door assessment survey, allocate the work to the teams, then create your door-to-door app that's used by the stormwater assessors, and then finally to use the letter templates that are available on the decision support tool platform. So the majority of these steps are reusable, like I said. The only difference each time is that you're gathering your new data and plugging it into this process. So we've went through the decision tree. We decided that we can undertake this type of work. We went through the 10 steps that are on the platform that show you how to replicate this process yourself. If you already have Esri subscription, a lot of this is no extra cost. And to mention as well that, like I mentioned, the actual development of the survey is what would take you the most amount of time. And due to the workings of the Durl project and refining that data schema, it's using that data schema, you're able to get good data back out. So all of the stats and the figures that you've seen today are only possible because of the time that was spent developing the list of survey questions and the behavior of the survey. So now that I've gone through the 10 steps, I just want to show you again what's possible if you follow our process. You can create dashboards and you can get stats like what you've seen today. And again, it's only possible because of the good data schema that you've put into this. You get good data back out. So this is, that's not going to follow me. Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is what's possible from a reporting perspective when you get your data back out. So this dashboard is a live feed of what the stormwater assessors are collecting every day. So as soon as they submit a survey in the field, this dashboard automatically updates with no intervention once it's set up. So I won't go into everything. I just want to touch on some of the most revealing information. So this looks at all of our misconnected properties. So that's our 555 plus our 88. And it tells us what the median cost of repairs is. So for a contractor, you're looking at €160, family helps €50, and DIY is €35. So you can see it's very reasonable and affordable to fix most misconnections. And again, if we look at the total cost spread, so 206 misconnection repairs cost less than €50. Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Brina. I'm sure that took at least a week to do all of that. I'm just talking about the PowerPoint. So that's excellent, and obviously a lot of the hard work has been done by the project in order to make this easy for local authorities if you want to do it on scale and over time. And time is the thing. If you want to invest maybe 2 or 3 years, if you want to put that information together, and take the time to develop the GIS, then, and of course it could be applied to other types of pollution processes as well. So our next presenter is Ger Staunton. Ger's a civil engineer and was the project engineer for the building of the ICWs for the Durl project. And he's just getting his slideshow ready. He's going to bounce between the ICW tool and the presentation. And I've been reminded again, if anybody wants to post a question on slido.com and type in the password DURL, and you can pop your question in there, and he can pass it through to us. So just on that, it is important to use the GIS part of the tool. You have to be an Esri product user. It's just that it's commonly used by local authorities, well supported, huge data sets, and huge backup and perpetuity in the products they supply. So I'll hand it over to you, Ger.
Thank you. So I'm going to go through the ICW Builder. That's a kind of program or step-by-step process that Brina has created to show you what we went through to plan and construct the ICWs, which took over 3 years, so 35 minutes should be pretty good if we can stick anywhere near that. So I'll be kind of flicking between the builder then and my presentation, so if you just bear with me in those times when I'm going from one to the other. And we'll be taking the graphene ICW of the 3 ICWs that we built kind of as an example as we go through the builder. So that is a picture of the graphene ICW, and it doesn't show the wetland. It's not the most visual photo of the wetland, but I chose it because it shows the wider area, and it just shows how, with the help of parks, leaving the area go a little bit looser and a little bit more informal, how well it's bedded in and how natural it looks in the area, that you hardly even know where the ICW begins and where the grassland goes afterwards. So I can show you where the ICW is with my printer. This is the ICW in this area here, going back. So the idea of the builder then is to show you how we got there. So where did we start from will be the question. So I'll skip out the pointer. So this is our area of the ICW. This is some drone footage we had. You can see our wetland area, cell 2, was in the green area there on the right. And we'll have a look now. We'll just go down, and this is going to turn around and come back, and we'll get a better view of the area. Or maybe it'll stop. Sorry, lads, I thought I could skip ahead there, but it won't let me. Okay. Well, look, that shows you the green space of where the ICW is anyway, and we'll go on then to the overhead drone footage of the actual built ICW. So this is the built ICW. So this is drone footage just coming up to cell 1. This is the biggest cell, the cell that does the most work. You can see the planting here. Certain species took longer to fill in. This is a year after the ICW was built. This is all cell 1. Then there's a pipe at the end of this cell that goes under the path you can see now on the left-hand side and goes into the cell 2. This is the cell 2 of the ICW, and then we have a kind of landscaped area after that, and our outfall is off to the right-hand side. So how did we get there? We got there through... Sorry, now I'll just go out of that. I'll just flick over to our ICW builder. So this takes you through, as I say, the stages of we went through to construct the ICW. So do we have a green open space? We saw that on the video, so we click yes. That brings up the next point of how many houses in the proposed catchment area. So in the Grafene catchment area, we had 614 houses. Now, analysing the data, we found that it's, for a purely misconnection point of view, it is cheaper or more likely financially cheaper to do misconnections inspections if your catchment is under 1,200 houses. But that doesn't take into account the long-term viability of an ICW and the less maintenance. While misconnections are always rebuilding as soon as you kind of leave the estate. People are still doing extensions, changing wash machines around. And also, it doesn't give you the biodiversity or the new interest in the park that an ICW will afford. So, is there pollution present in the stormwater line? Yes. And then it asks us to enter the retention time. So the retention time is the time it takes the water from the time it comes into the ICW to the time it leaves the ICW. In general, you might be looking at around 24 hours. If something's very heavily polluted, you might increase that to 30 hours, or if it's not too polluted, you'd decrease it. So in Grafene, we had pollutants, but there was also, must have been some groundwater in the pipe because the residual flow was always quite high. So like per 100 millilitres, it wasn't that polluted. So we go for a 16-hour retention time on this. And again, this will all be publicly available, so you'll be able to kind of play around with this yourselves when it's released. And enter the residual flow. So we'll say if it's 7.5 litres per second, it gives us a recommended treatment area of 2,160. So again, you can mess around with that yourselves. Like if you leave that at 20 hours, you can see that your, sorry, where's it gone? The residential flow, just have to bring that back down. Too far. It brings it up to 2,700, which is roughly what the Grafene ICW treatment area was. I think it was 2,650. So then the next question it asks is about the depth of the drainage, because we want to do all this by gravity without the use of pumps. So if your drainage, as it says here, if the drainage is deeper than 2 metres, it's not really, an ICW mightn't be for you, because you're going to end up with an excavation probably in excess of 2.4 metres deep. Now again, there's exceptions to that, like at DR33 in Grafene, when Niall was one earlier on the slope, the drainage was deep, but because it was on a slope, it can pop out at a lower level. So we will just click that our drainage line was less than 2 metres deep to allow us to proceed. And really, ideally, you would want to be excavating probably less than 1.5 metres deep, so your drainage line, the shallower it is, the better for an ICW, because it means less excavations and a shallower ICW. So if we give a treatment length, say, of 90 metres, this is going to calculate, do a rough estimate of the spoil for me. 90 metres long by 30 metres wide for the ICW. And then we put the bank slopes in. For the Grafene ICW, we were 1 and 5. This was kind of a stipulation from parks to keep it safe, to allow their machinery work in the area at 1 and 5 slopes, and also to for the visual impact of it, that you're not coming down at a 1 and 1 steep slope for the ICW kind of starts here. It's all very natural. You get that natural finish that we were looking at in the first photo. So enter the depth of the drainage line. The depth of our drainage line in the vicinity of the ICW itself was about 1.2 metres. And then that gives us an estimated spoil of about 6,600 metres cubed, or about 660 truckloads. So that gives you a scale of your project straight away. I'll just go back to my presentation now, if you bear with me. Yeah, that's showing this. Okay, so sorry. Next slide. So that's asking us again, do we have the green space? We do. And then we have our estimated spoil, and you can see the spoil in one of the photos here. And in the next photo, you can particularly see it. This is at the Dodder Valley DR33 ICW. So for me, there is a bit of drainage involved in the earthworks, and Isla's gone now, so I can say it. There's a little bit of planting as well, but it's mainly it's an earthworks project. it's all about kind of moving muck around. 80% of the project to me is earthworks. It's moving muck from A to B, excavating a hole, and then what you're going to do with the spoil. So knowing the spoil quantities earlier on gives you a good picture of the scale of the project. It's crucial for the planning of the project to ascertain if the soil can be reused on site, and if so, where it can be reused. Again, if you consult with your parks. Reusing the soil on site, I suppose, has two huge impacts on the scale of your project. Like, if you're probably saving €200 a load if you keep the soil on site versus sending it away to a landfill, which is about €120,000 for the estimate we got there for the graphene project, which would be, if we had to remove that from site, that would be adding about 50% onto the cost of the project. And the other thing then is the environmental impact. Like, you're doing this to try and help the environment, to improve the river, but if you're moving 660 truckloads off site, you're kind of going, is it, are we doing the right thing? So if you can keep it on site, all the better. As I said, then it's useful for an early estimate on the cost of the project, and then the environmental impact we talked about there. So the other thing then is where you're going to put the soil. I think it's very important to think about that before you start, and how high you're going to go or what you're going to do. Again, I think consultation with parks is key, because they'll know what will look good in the park, and you need to decide before you move ahead how high you're going, what the slopes of the bank is going to be. And then you also need, I think, then to kind of, you have those drawings done up with the slope coming up and flat on the top and down again. But what you really need then is a good machine driver to make it look natural and to fit in. So in this picture here, we have the two areas where we stored our spoil. This is the spoil going in before it's landscaped. And then that's a photograph of the same two areas, probably flicked around, of where the soil is. And it's very hard to see where it's gone. Like, so this is an area here down at the GA Pitch and Graphene Park where there was a little berm, and it was a hump. It couldn't be cut by the tractors and mowers, and we put a lot more, like probably 10 times the amount of spoil in there, but it stands out an awful lot less than it did beforehand. And the other area here, then there was a natural berm coming down this area here, and you can only see where we filled the soil really, or notice it by the kind of wildflowers coming up. The grass looks a little bit different, and you can see the yellow of the mustard seed there, and it just blends in nicely to the area. Okay, I'll just I have to flick back now to my other ones. Just give me 1 second. So we're back with the builder then. The next step then, when you've got an estimate of your soil, is you check a few more things, like, is the land council owned, which sounds obvious in a park, but you'd be surprised. A lot of them, there's developers and things have given over land or done land swaps when they're doing houses, and or before it becomes a park, and something wasn't finished and something wasn't done and something had to be signed over, and that was 15 years ago and it was never done. So it's definitely worth checking. Don't assume that it is council land, that it is council owned before you start. And then the next question is, do you have the financial resources? So there's no point in undertaking the project if you can't complete it. And there's a lot of grants there, like the Life Project and other grants there, you could look at using to finance as well. So we'll click yes, and it says then we've passed for the ICW, that we can go on to the next stage, kind of from the concept stage. We can move on. So if I click next then, we have looking at the site-specific area then, right? So you've done a kind of desktop study and identified a couple of areas, done a few spoil estimates. Now you want to really check things out on site. So we have confirmed the drainage layouts levels on site and ensure the falls discharge back to the pipework or watercourse. So you'll have your drawings on your desktop study, giving you the depths of the drainage lines, but you need to check them on site as well. There was one ICW we were going to build, and the depth of the drainage line was actually lower than the river, so that was never going to work. And I was wondering why the pipe was following the river along for a kilometre down the way, and it's so it can find a point to discharge it. So we had to rule that one out and find another site. Consider surrounding land use suitability. So again, there's things here like sports pitches, park runs. If the area has already been used for community stuff, it's probably not the best idea to try and build an ICW there. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get community buy-in, and the area's already probably got a good use. Then we have identify possible locations for spoil on site. So we talked about that a lot already, so I'll move on and calculate the cost estimates. Carry out a site survey. So at this stage then we would have done a topographical GPS survey, mapping the whole site, mapping the footpaths, the edge of the river, anything that's in it, like service chambers, and then just a topo survey taking levels every couple of metres for the site, and that helps us do up better drawings and better design and spoil estimates later on. Consider tree removal may be an issue. This has always been a big issue with the public, especially in parks and councillors. So it's worth considering. Considering potential issues like realigning of footpaths. Will they be required even temporarily? And then complete site drawings, depths and estimates of spoil from your topo survey. Then you can do a better soil analysis. We also have identify other services on site. So that's getting the likes of the ESB drawings, gas drawings, aircom drawings, and making sure you're not looking to build an ICW over a big trunk gas main or something. You know, that's not going to be moved for you or your project, and you don't want to dig it up. Check flooding maps, even though the ICWs will survive a little bit of flooding, but if they're going to be underwater a lot or constantly flooded, then it's probably not the best place for it. Check rights of way, and carry out an invasive species survey. So this is, Jerry actually helped us with that at the time, to identify any species. If there's Japanese knotweed in the area where you're planning to dig, again, you might need to rethink things, because moving the spoil around or treating it, you're not going to be able to build an ICW in that area for some time. And carry out site investigations. So I'll just flick back to my presentation there, sorry. Getting quicker at it. It'll go wrong now. So that's the topo survey that we completed. And there's just an example of one of the drawings that we were doing up kind of for the planning stage for graphene. And we have a picture then of the board gas drawing. Sorry, I'll put on my laser there. This is the area where the ICW is going in, and as you can see, it's showing clear gas services, and it was clear of mostly all services except the drainage, which was great. Then we carried out the site investigations. That's the report there. What we're looking for in the site investigations, I suppose, is the topsoil depths. That's important, because even in the park area where you think it was 300, we were left with only maybe 6 to 8 inches of topsoil. And the graphene ICW was built nearly in a month. I'm used to kind of longer projects where you take all the soil off and the sod would rot down. But on our project, there was no time for the sod to rot down, so we ended up having to buy in topsoil, which was unexpected. You're looking for made-up ground or contaminated material during the site investigation stage. The clay content of the soil is very important to form a clay liner. We didn't use any plastic liners. That comes up as a question a lot. It was all just a natural clay liner to hold the water for the ICW. And then inversely to that, I suppose you're looking to make sure, is there permeable, or to make sure there isn't a permeable area present, or if there is, you've got enough clay to make your permeable liner. If you're on sand or gravel, then your water's just going to disappear out of the ICW, and it's not going to treat the water properly. Or you might have to import clay to make your liner, which will have an effect on the cost of the project. You're looking for the groundwater level. There's no point in building an ICW underneath the groundwater level, or you're just going to be treating groundwater instead of polluted water. You're looking for the rock level, because if you go down and the base of your ICW is going to be below the rock, well, you're most naturally going to incur or come across groundwater, and you're going to have to break the rock out to get your clay liner in, which is going to add costs onto the project again, or make it less viable. You're looking for bad ground conditions, such as silt or running sand, and existing service locations and levels, which we talked about already. So I'll just go back now to our builder. Click the next stage. So here we have a kind of checklist of people that we would have engaged with during the planning stage of the ICW. So you can tick through these. They're just an idea. It's not an exhaustive list. And if you click no to some of them mightn't be specific to your particular area. So, you'll still be able to move on. But we consulted with parks. They were probably the biggest consultees during the project, because we were putting the project in their area, in their park. So we consulted with them a lot. The heritage officer, who's able to give a lot of valuable information on protected species in the area, what the wildflower seed bank is. They pointed out Tufa Springs to us on one, which was something we hadn't considered. That'll come up again later on. Speak to the councillors. They'll let you know of any local areas, fisheries, national parks and wildlife services. One of our ICWs was beside a proposed natural heritage area. We have planning, utilities, strategic policies committee, area committee meetings, and public participation network. So that'll bring us to the next stage of the process. which is environmental reports. Have you allowed enough time for additional surveys as part of the AA or EIA screening process? Now, you can tick yes or no here and go to next, but I think you should only be allowed to click no and go to next, because no matter how long you think it's going to take for the AA or the EIA screening, I'd say it's going to take longer. So we'll just go back to my presentation there for a second, sorry. We'll go through some of the reports there that we had to go through. So, as I say, yeah, we started with EIA screening reports that Lorraine procured, and that needed an ecological report, which is fine, but then we needed a bat survey report, an archaeological assessment, and then the ecological report pointed out Tufa Springs, which are a kind of an alkaline-based stream that leaves a hard residue behind. They're a protected item, and we had, I think, what's called an Annex 1 version. There's probably people here who know better than me on that, with the different species of moss growing beside it. So then we needed a Tufa Spring ecologist survey and report, and then that ecologist, needed a hydrology report to close out her report, to close out the AA and EIA screening report. So you can see it kind of, you start off with one and you could end up with 3 or 4 reports. I'll just go back to the assessment now again. So the next stage of the process for us was the Part 8 planning. Items required to take place before the official Part 8. So I've singled these out because they're not kind of included in the timelines for the Part 8. There are links to the South Dublin Part 8 guidelines, which will give you a good idea of the timelines and other items. Most councils, I know there's different people here from different councils, so most of the councils have a similar set of guidelines that'll take you through the process step by step. So we have to meet the planners regarding outline planning application documents. You have to organise your newspaper notice, notify elected members, meet the area planner regarding the final planning application. So the first one is an informal meeting to get advice. The second one is a compulsory kind of meeting. Prepare physical planning notifications ready to erect on the day, and consult with the communications department for a public consultation. So that all kind of happens before the official Part 8 process kicks off. Then, as I say, that we have a link to the guidelines here for South Dublin that you can click on, and it'll bring you there. I'll allow you to do that in your own time. And then we have the Part 8 preliminary drawings. So we've included a link to the drawings there and all the documents that we included as part of our Part 8 application, which might help anyone thinking of doing an ICW with their documents. So I'll just get back here now to the... So again, that's just the Part 8, the process and the time it takes, and that's our newspaper notice and a list of the files that we included for each application. And one of the Part 8 drawings that we put in as part of our submission, an informative drawing for the public to explain to them what we were doing. I'll just go back to here. So the next stage was the tender process. So I suppose from earlier on we decided you'd have to decide whether you're doing a design/build project where you would get a consultant on board, explain to them what you're looking for, do up drawings, do up a design of the ICW, and then get them to do up tender documents and go out for a contractor to build the ICW. We went down the other route. We did a design and build project, as Isla talked about earlier, which probably saves time overall and would hopefully have some more cost certainty to it. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, which we can look at in a minute. And then have you gone restricted or open procedure? A restricted procedure, you'd have to run a competition first to see who would qualify for the procedure, or an open procedure then. You don't have to do that, but you could get hundreds of submissions in. But we went with open because it's quite a specialist area, so we were confident we wouldn't get too many returns back, and we wanted the maximum we could get within reason. Then we have a link to the construction management framework documents online, their website, and we have the tender documents that we put forward there as well. So Step by step at the tender process, you draft your tender documents for the procurement process. Share your draft tender documents with procurement to finalise. There's a lot of expertise in the different council procurement departments, and they were able to give a lot of advice and even rewording of certain things. Launch your tender and advertise accordingly, most likely on e-tenders. Then throughout the tender process, clarify any tender queries that come in and make sure that the clarifications are visible to everyone tendering. Set up a tender evaluation panel once tenders are in to evaluate the tenders. Agree on the successful tender or further project, and then inform the tenders that they're success with a letter of intent or a letter of regret if they haven't succeeded, and award the contract. So I'll just flip back here. So again, as I spoke about, we went with a design and build contract as we felt it gave more cost certainty. We went with the open procedure as at the time we did not believe that we would get too many tenders in, and we wanted to maximise what we could get in. It also meant we didn't have to run a separate qualification competition, saving time. And that's just a list of the tender documents. So there's quite a bit goes into it. Now, a lot of them are just sample forms, but a lot of them aren't. So there's a good few documents to go through. And then we're into the construction stage of the process. So I'll just go back here. So click next. So at the construction stage of the process, you're really handing over to the contractor at that stage. So we concentrated then on communication, informing the public through social media, website, initial on-site presence for the first few days. We had somebody there to answer questions. We put banners up with the website, QR codes for the website, and just informing what was going on in the park, because people are very interested when you start digging up their park. Maintain consultation with the Parks Department throughout. Continue working with the design team. As Isla said, we were working all the way through. Little problems that arose or little changes here and there just to deliver the project. Consider engaging members of the public for a planting day. So I was probably a little bit sceptical of that people would give up their free time and come planting a wetland in Grafene. But we had to do time slots, and all the time slots were filled as well for the day. There was even people on holidays from America who decided to come and plant on their holidays the Grafene wetland. So there you go. The health and safety is something you'll probably still have to keep an eye on throughout the construction stage. Certainly to get a copy of insurances from the contractor. Obtain a copy of the pedestrian site traffic management plan from the contractor before work start and go through it with parks. You hand over site responsibility, as I spoke about, to the contractor, and obtain a safety file before the end of the project, giving you all the information on the as-built and what materials they use, etc., which isn't too exhaustive for an ICW. So that's it for the builder. I just have a few photos then and things of the actual construction stage process. Sorry, where am I now today? So that's us starting in the Grafene Valley ICW with nothing built yet. The area in the background there is where the cell 1 of the ICW will be. That's the information signs we were talking about that we had up. The picture of the community planting day, which Isla also covered, which, as I say, went down really well. People were really enthusiastic about it and all turned up. This is us excavating at the start of the project, excavation for the base of the ICW, or even in areas where we hit a bit of weathered rock here and there, we had to excavate a little bit lower and then put clay back in to form the liner. This is Colleen's now forming the liner and compacting it and rolling it to make sure it holds the water. Topsoil in the area. Then this is creating a new chamber on the drainage line to bring a feed over to the ICW with the polluted water to treat. And then once the water is in the topsoil ICW, we can start planting, and that's the lads planting there. And then there's a few pictures, as we saw, of the area of landscape in the area afterwards, and just making sure everything looks nice and natural again afterwards. And that's kind of a before and after of the ICW. So my next slide says time for questions, but it's not. Richard will have them later. What I'm going to flick to now is just the ICW calculator. So we've done up another tool, just an Excel sheet of calculating the costs for the ICW based on our experience. So we built 3 of the ICWs, and based on that, we can give an estimated cost. But as again, we've only got 3 data points for our specific sites, so they're not, don't take them as gospel and plan your budgets all around them, but it will give you an idea if you're thinking about it from a concept stage. Just 1 second now. Yeah. So we have, README should open up first. So a couple of notes at the start to go through. Inflation has obviously a big thing. We tendered this kind of in Q3 of 2021, was it? And since then, there's been a lot of inflation in everything, as we all know, but particularly in construction as well. So we have allowed in this calculator to present inflation of 24%. That's kind of compounding effect over the last couple of years. And we would urge users then to, if they're using this in a couple of years' time, to do their own research and add in the inflation rate that'll take them up to their point of time. We've also, instead of, we could have just worked out the average cost per metre squared of the ICW and given a very easy calculation, but we wanted to try and put in some of the learning that we've learned, so we've put in a table of what we call complicating factors, which we'll see in a while. And then, as I said, this is only for an estimate of cost. We're kind of denying liability here. So we'll go to the cost estimator itself. So as you can see up the top, we have our 24% inflation rate. If you're looking at this in 2 years' time, there's a cell here for you to put in the inflation rate between now and then, which will change the figures here down below. So these are roughly the figures. We have rounded them off for our ICWs, just not to have the exact figures of the project in from VC and Colleen's point of view. But this is quite a good estimate. We have the graphene, ICW, DR35 and DR33. So then in our table here, which is used for the calculation, you can go through it. It has different costs per metre squared. Costs after the inflation is allowed are these red ones here. And then what we did to calculate the cost is we took out any costs that were kind of very specific to all 3 ICWs, such as preliminaries, safety files, that kind of thing, the things that cost the same for each one. Kept them separate and then worked out the cost per metre squared of the area. So the real calculator then, and it's in Excel, so anyone who opens this when we make it live will be able to mess around and play in it and change these factors and just to get an idea of it. So enter the area of your ICW. I think it was 2,650 for graphene. And then so you're asked a couple of questions then on the complicating factors. Is it a small ICW? Obviously, if you're doing an ICW, we have less than 1,000 metres squared here, it's going to cost you more per metre squared than if you're doing a big one, just economies of scale. And we have an uplift factor of 20% there, but that wasn't a factor for us because graphene one was quite large. It was 2,600, so I click no. And that will ensure then that uplift factor is not applied to our calculations down below. Is the ICW on a steep slope? Again, no, but for DR33, it would be. The depth of new drainage is greater than 2 metres. You see, again, we're applying a uplift factor of 20% there, which you might say, no, it's going to be 30% or something. You can change that, or 10% if you're on a gentle slope. For us, no. Are there large earthworks involved? Well, we did have a bit of spoil to move in graphene over to the GA pitches, but it's not such large earthworks like DR33, so I don't think it's 25% uplift, so I can change that, as I say, to maybe 5%. Where existing service is an issue, no. Difficult ground conditions, no. And then other factors. So if you're doing a specific site, you'll always have your site-specific issues, and you can put in other factors here with their uplift cost to the estimate. And we're getting an estimate back then for the graphene ICW of about €259,000, which is probably slightly over what it was. I think, in today's money, allowing for inflation to today, we're roughly around €242,000 for graphene. So that's the calculator, which will also be available as part of the ICW builder. And now Richard can do his questions. Thanks, everyone.
Well, the bad news, Ger, is you're answering the questions, not me. Yeah, please, and I'll take Brina as well. Thanks. So, as you can see, an awful lot of information, an awful lot of technical information, but I suppose taking what is probably about 6 years of work and thinking and putting it into 2 workshops. Are there any questions? There must be at least one question from the floor. Yes.
Yes, so I'm Daniel Hoffrey with Ishbaron. This is super interesting project. Just really impressive, like the amount of work that goes into identifying where there's disconnections and then actually fixing it. It must make you think that when somebody buys a new kitchen appliance, you must practically want to follow them home. Connect more than that. But so what can be done on the preventative side?
Okay, the question from the floor was, should we follow people home when they buy a washing machine because to make sure they don't misconnect it? But the actual question is, are there any ways to prevent misconnections from happening in the first place? It's a very good question. I'm not sure if we know the answer to that, but Breen is shaking her head. She's not taking this.
Well, yeah, I'll take it. Well, I suppose we have our website and we have been putting items out in social media. There's at the very start of the day, if you remember back to the kind of cartoon information video there that Teresa put out, there is another video as well. I saw that some people had used it in their clips, the little YouTube cover of following the stormwater assessors around for a day, kind of taking a video of them doing their assessments. So we are trying to educate the public that way. The project has been in a couple of the magazines. It's gone probably for an award or 2 as well. The Israel one, was it with Israel or which award did we win? I can't remember. But my point is that we have been putting that out to the public and making them aware of it. And I suppose beyond making them aware of it, there's not much we can do. But I think when you go into a housing estate as well, like those people will remember now, and they'll probably be educating the builders and the plumbers when they come in to make sure that they're connecting the pipes right, especially if they had to do one of the repairs themselves. And I suppose then it's just hopefully when the project ends as part of the surface water in the council that we can continue that work in other housing estates, looking and screening for manholes with misconnections and taking the learnings from the Durl project and applying it there. Once you go through an area, the idea is to sort of never go. You're not going to repeat this in an area, I suppose. It wouldn't be cost effective at that point. No, not straight away anyway. It would, it'd be a good few years before you'd repeat it in an area unless, as I say, we were just inspecting a manhole and saw signs of pollution. Yeah, you'd be hopefully moving to a new area and, as I say, taking the learnings. Like, I think that was a big one. The big one is the extensions here and maybe also the one with the older housing estates, which you didn't realise, the older housing estates obviously have a huge effect as well.
Just to add to that, for future evaluation of the housing stock that have been evaluated now, there's potential to use change detection methods, tools in the GIS system in the ARC Pro so we can eliminate the ones we have looked at right now. The LIFE project can eliminate the ones they've looked at, and with the change detection you can find new extended buildings. And then you're only looking at new extended buildings. So I think technology and the use of GIS will certainly make this, once you've gotten up to a level of cleanliness in a catchment, from there on you could allocate a lot less resources. You just go and pick extended houses and look at some strategic manholes. And therefore that's one of the other cost benefits of this in the long term. Did I see another question? Eva?
Will be available to others where we house, and I'm going to keep going. And then 2 others are again, how long the desktop work, as Daniel said, a huge amount of work. How long did it take for those initial kind of 4 stages of purely just before the labs go out to actually start the work? How long did that take? And how long did it take the contractor on site to do it?
Okay, I'm going to try and remember 3 questions. Woo. The information will be, the best place to go is the Dublin Urban Rivers Life website, and from there then you'll be able to access the ICW builder. And the question was, how long, taking the information on the ICW builder, now that the project has taken it up to this standard of information and the SOPs, the standard operating procedures and the methodologies describing that, how long will it take to for someone to hit that information on the decision support tool and turn it into something that the LIFE project is using now? I'll pass that to Brina.
Yeah, so the GIS set up those beginning first stages where you're just processing and gathering your data. Say to get your geodirectory, get your manhole information and create the apps, I would say you could allow a month for the actual just GIS of that part alone, and then it goes on to the actual field work, and that could be whatever, depending on how much screening you have to do and the weather. But yeah, for the first portion of it, I would estimate, about a month, and all of the documents about how to actually set that up are on the platform, so you can just follow that through, so it'll be a lot quicker, is the thinking behind that.
And the last part of that question, an easy one, how long does it take to build an ICW once you get the fence up?
Well, the Graphene ICW, the contractors are actually moving on to the next ICW after 1 month. We did the 3 ICWs in, I was just calculating it there when Brina was talking, a week less than 4 months. So I suppose less than 1.5 months really would be a good estimate for an ICW of that size.
I think we have another question there. So the question is, should the local authority be assessing houses as they're built and housing estates as they're built? I think that's a fair summation. And I can answer that question myself. The South Dublin County Council, and I think to some extent Dunleer Rathdown County Council, do what they call a taking in charge inspection. So when a housing estate is built by a developer, and they look to transfer the common areas, the public areas like the footpaths, the parks, the drainage, the water pipes, etc., into public ownership, they apply for taking in charge. It's a legal process of literally transferring ownership. And at that stage, South Dublin County Council goes in, screens the manholes for pollution content. If it's polluted, it's not taken in charge until that pollution is resolved. So that process is underway, and it's a really cost-effective way. I think in one of the slides it showed a bundle of houses, might have been Paul, talking about the jackpot day where you get 6 or 8 houses. And at a taking in charge point, you would find that, or nearly find that, if it's a direct misconnection or a damaged pipe. Very soon, once people are living in those houses, because the taking in charge process is about, it could be 2 years before someone looks to transfer ownership from the contractor to the public authority. And at that stage then, there will be people using the drainage system and you will spot things like that. But it is absolutely very, very good point to be made that prevention at that stage, because you have a lot of leverage before it goes into the public ownership. Yeah, I guess the question is whether we shouldn't have eliminated the buildings from this process on the GIS. But I guess I can answer that as well. There was a separate team doing that work, what we call the pollution control team in South Dublin and in Dunleary. They do that work outside the project. So that would have been work they would have done beforehand, before the project, so there was no point splitting it back into the project and then putting it back out when the project's finished. Do we have any other questions from the floor or any from this? Okay. So just for anybody who's not completely familiar, when it says stormwater screening, it's actually lifting the cover and looking in for, is it polluted or not? That's you get so used to the terms, but it is actually just screening means doing that yes or no answer on it by lifting it and looking it in for pollution. I'm just trying to think if there's any others. You can do that field survey, use the apps on a tablet.
So the screening part is using the Field Maps app, so that's on a tablet or a mobile device.
And the Part 8 process, what does that mean? Like, because people talk about planning permission, could you just explain what Part 8 means for a second, as opposed?
Hi, thanks, Richard. Yeah. So the Part 8 process is the process by which the council applies for planning permission, because they can't go through the normal process of applying to themselves for planning permission. So it's a process whereby they do up the information, they consult with the public, and then the councillors vote on whether or not to accept the proposal, and that's basically how the giving planning if they vote yes. Yeah.
With the councillors, do they all agree to the proposal?
Yeah, I was going to give it back to you. The question was, did the councillors all unanimously vote for the project? And I'll have to actually ask Richard. I think they did, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, they did, yeah.
I think that's really the end of the questions, which brings us very close to closing out the project, or the conference. I'd just like to do some thanks before we pull back to Paul. Aidan Bly was due to close out the conference. He sends his apologies, but Paul's going to deputise in his place. We'd like to thank the attendees here today and those that attended online. We'd like to thank the Rua Red staff and catering, in particular Hugh for lighting. We'd like to thank our ACE team here, Dave on IT, and Brian on sound, and surprisingly a lot of IT as well, Brian. More than I thought. We'd like to thank the actual Durl team itself, past and present, and the actual, I guess what goes on notice or unsung sometimes is the support of senior management to actually, put their wheel behind it, put the money out, advocate to councillors and the public, and stick with it when times can be a little bit. They have to trust in the Durl team, they have to trust in their staff to do things that are outside probably what their comfort zone is, so to acknowledge that as well. And there is the site visit tomorrow. I'm not sure if people here are going to go to the site visit, but if you look at the programme, you may be looking online and attending the site visit tomorrow, so have a look at the programme, and there will be a site visit tomorrow. And I think if anyone's interested in building a wetland, either have a look at go along tomorrow or make contact with the Durl team to go and look at the ICWs. And they're all in public parks, so you can just wander in and have a look yourself. So I'm going to pass the microphone, or you go back to the podium and ask Paul Buggy to close out the conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Richard. I think it's important, just as we finish, to remember that the LIFE project was a demonstration project. And the idea behind a demonstration project is that you demonstrate, you show the best way to deal with the problem of misconnections in urban rivers. And the project has shown a very workable strategy to remove misconnections in urban areas that has never been done before. Nobody's ever done as many misconnections in such a short period of time. And the lessons that have been learned are really valuable. And I would liken them to maybe I'm a little dramatic, but the discovery of fire. Imagine the first guy who had fire on a stick and he went, oh, that's important. That better not go out. What am I going to do? And I fear it could go out if we don't carry the torch. So I'm speaking to those of us here, but also those online who maybe have been inspired to try something, to find a catchment that they know has problems, and start to put some of the principles we've talked about into practice and just see yourself that it works. Engagement is really important. Don't be like me and be a big scaredy cat. Have some courage and try. That's the first thing. We have to do it to make the flame grow. The second thing is that it's very important. I managed to get a side seat on the project without actually being on the project. So I got to see it from the outside looking in. And I can't tell you how many hours, in particular, Richard put in of his own time, weekend after weekend, to get the project in the first place, to get life to accept. And then on the project itself, so much time and effort and energy and persuasion and courage. And similarly with Lorraine, they won't tell you, but Lorraine probably hasn't slept through 3 nights, so I wouldn't be surprised. If you wanted to replace Lorraine, you would need at least 3 people who have IQ of about 140 each. So, I've been in public service all my career, and I have never met 2 more dedicated, sincere, and talented people. So I would just like you to recognise them now, if you don't mind. So just sufficient to say thank you for coming and thank you for paying attention. Thank you for all the presentations. They were excellent, bar the graveyard shift. They were excellent and very easy to follow and very practical. And I just wish you well on your journey home and thank you for coming.